My mother said it in front of everyone, casual as sprinkling salt on a wound. She told me to stop relying on the family. I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply nodded and quietly packed. The problem is that they think I am the leech, but I am the one holding the keys to the empire they live off of. They are about to burn the only bridge that leads them to safety. My name is Elena Walsh. I am 34 years old, and in my professional life, I am a senior risk analyst for Arkstone Risk Solutions in Madison, Wisconsin. My job is entirely predominantly based on calculation. I assess exposure. I calculate the probability of catastrophic failure. I look at a structure, whether it is a corporate merger or a precarious investment portfolio, and I tell the client exactly where the cracks are before the whole thing collapses under its own weight. I am very good at my job because I do not let emotion cloud the data. I see the world in red flags and safety margins. It is a skill set I cultivated not for corporate America, but for survival in the dining room of a 2-story colonial house in Pinebrook. The irony of my profession was not lost on me as I sat at my mother's dining table for the holiday lunch. If this gathering were a client portfolio, I would have advised immediate liquidation of assets and a total cease and desist on all operations. The table looked perfect. It was a scene ripped straight from the pages of a high-end lifestyle magazine. There was the roast duck, glazed to a mahogany shine. There were the roasted root vegetables, dusted with fresh thyme. There was the silver cutlery, polished until it gleamed under the chandelier light, and the heavy linen napkins folded into crisp, architectural swans. My mother, Deborah Walsh, cared deeply about optics, to the outside world, to the neighbors walking their dogs past the front window. We were the picture of the American dream. Inside, the air was so tight it felt like it could snap a rib. We had been eating in a silence that was not peaceful. It was the heavy pressurized silence of a submarine taking on water. I focused on cutting my duck. The knife scraped against the porcelain. That was the only sound in the room until my mother reached for her wine glass. It was a Pinot Noir, a 2018 vintage from the Willamette Valley. I knew this because I had bought the case. I watched her hand, manicured and steady, lift the crystal. She took a long sip, her eyes scanning the table but landing nowhere, staring through us rather than at us. Then, she set the glass down. The sound was sharp. Glass against ceramic coaster. "You know, Elena," she said. Her voice was conversational, light, almost breezy. It was the tone she used when she was discussing the weather or a sale at the department store. "I have been thinking." I stopped chewing. I did not look up immediately. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the body's primitive warning system alerting me to an incoming threat. "About what, Mom?" "About your attitude," she said. She picked up her fork and poked at a roasted carrot. "It is just too much. The hovering, the constant need to insert yourself. I think it is time you step back." She looked up then, her eyes locking onto mine with a cold, flat precision. "You really need to stop relying on the family." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. I thought perhaps I had suffered a stroke or a sudden auditory hallucination. I looked around the table, waiting for the punchline, waiting for someone to laugh at the absurdity of the statement. My father, Kenneth, did what he has done for the last 30 years. He became invisible. He hunched his shoulders, shrinking into his cashmere sweater, and focused entirely on sawing a piece of meat that was already cut. He was the classic enabler, the man who believed that peace was simply the absence of noise, regardless of the cost. If he stayed quiet, he survived. That was his strategy. My older brother, Grant, suddenly found the label on the salad dressing bottle fascinating. He turned it over and over in his hands, avoiding my gaze. Grant, who was 38 and currently between entrepreneurial ventures, sat there in a button-down shirt that I knew for a fact I had paid for 3 Christmases ago. My younger brother, Lucas, did not look away. He smirked. It was a small, tight curvature of the lips, barely visible, but I saw it. He took a bite of a roll and chewed slowly, enjoying the spectacle. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was steady, but it sounded strange to my own ears, detached, as if I were speaking from underwater. "You heard me," Deborah said, taking another sip of the wine I bought. "You are 34. Elena, it is becoming pathetic. You are always here, always trying to be involved, always looking for validation. You need to cut the cord. Stop relying on us for your emotional stability. Stop relying on the family to fill whatever void you have in that life of yours in Madison." I looked at the table. I looked at the roast duck, $80 from the organic butcher in town. My card. I looked at the wine, $240 for the case. My card. I looked at the new heating unit humming in the corner of the dining room, keeping this drafty old house at a comfortable 72 degrees while the Wisconsin winter raged outside. $1,200. Installation included. My check. I looked at the sweater my father was wearing, the watch on Grant's wrist, the phone sitting next to Lucas's plate. I looked at the roof over our heads, a roof that had needed $15,000 in repairs last spring after a storm tore through the county. I remembered the panic in my mother's voice then. I remembered the way she had wept on the phone, terrified of the leaks, terrified of the mold. I remembered transferring the money from my savings account within the hour, categorizing it in my mind as necessary maintenance. "Stop relying on the family," I repeated. The words tasted like ash. "See?" Deborah sighed, looking at Grant. "This is exactly what I mean. Look at her face, so sensitive, always the victim." "I am not playing the victim," I said, and now the calm was beginning to fracture, replaced by a cold, hard incredulity. "I am trying to understand the logic. Mom, you are telling me to stop relying on you, on this family." "Yes," she said definitively. "It is unhealthy." "Is it?" I asked. I put my knife and fork down. They made a clatter that caused my father to flinch, because from where I am sitting, the reliance seems to flow in the opposite direction. "Who paid for this meal? Mom. Who paid for the heat that is keeping you warm right now? Who paid for the property tax bill last month when you said Dad's pension check was short?" The atmosphere at the table shifted instantly. It went from tense to hostile. I had broken the cardinal rule of the Walsh household. I had mentioned the money. Deborah's face hardened. The mask of the concerned mother vanished, replaced by the sneer of a woman who felt her authority being challenged. "Oh, here we go," she said, rolling her eyes. "I knew you would do this. You always do this. You are so transactional. Elena, it is disgusting." "Transactional?" I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, hysterical and sharp. "I am stating facts. You are controlling," she snapped. "That is what you are. You think because you throw a little money around, you own us. You think buying a turkey gives you the right to dictate how this family functions. It is manipulative. You use money as a weapon because you do not know how to have a normal relationship." "I use money to keep the lights on," I said. "That is enough," Grant cut in. He finally looked up from the salad dressing bottle, his face flushed with righteous indignation. "Seriously, Elena, it is a holiday. Talking about money is incredibly tacky. Can't you just be a sister for once instead of an accountant?" "Tacky," I said, looking at him. "Grant, you asked me for rent money 3 weeks ago." "I was in a bind," Grant shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "And I told you I would pay you back, but you never let anyone forget it, do you? You hold it over our heads. That is why Mom is right. You use your little handouts to make yourself feel superior. It is narcissism, pure and simple." I turned to Lucas, my baby brother, 29 years old, the artist, the dreamer, the one whose student loans were currently on auto-pay from my checking account because he was finding himself and the interest rates were predatory. "And you?" I asked him. "Do you agree with this?" Lucas shrugged. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and tossed it onto his plate. "I mean, they have a point. Elle, you are kind of intense. If you are struggling so much that you have to count every penny you spend on a holiday lunch, maybe you should just say that, if you are broke, just tell us. Don't take it out on Mom." If I am broke, the audacity was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of revisionist history constructed in real time. They had taken the reality that I was the financial bedrock upon which their comfortable lives rested and inverted it. In their narrative, I was the desperate one. I was the clinger. I was the one buying their affection because I had nothing else to offer, and they were the saints for tolerating my presence. I looked at my mother again. She was back to sipping her wine, looking vindicated by her son's support. She did not look like a woman who was afraid of losing her safety net. She looked like a woman who believed the net was her birthright, and that the person holding it up was merely a servant who had gotten too uppity. I realized then that it was not just ungratefulness, it was resentment. They hated me. They hated me because they needed me. Every check I wrote was a reminder of their own inadequacy, and rather than be grateful, they chose to despise the source. I was not a daughter to Deborah. I was not a sister to Grant and Lucas. I was a wallet with a heartbeat. I was a utility, like the electricity or the water, and like a utility. I was only noticed when I flickered. They wanted the power, but they resented the meter reader, and now they were trying to cut the meter reader out, convinced that the power would just keep flowing by magic. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It wasn't sadness. I had expected sadness. I had expected to cry, to plead, to pull out my phone and show them the bank transfers, to beg them to see everything I did for them. But the tears did not come. Instead, I felt a cooling sensation. It started in the center of my chest and radiated outward to my fingertips. It was the feeling of a risk assessment completing. The data was in. The probability of this investment ever yielding a return was 0%. The exposure was 100%. The only logical move was total divestment. I looked at the half-eaten duck on my plate. I looked at the condensation on the wine glass. I looked at the faces of the people who shared my DNA. My father, still staring at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. Grant, looking smug and self-righteous. Lucas, bored and dismissive. And Deborah, waiting for my apology, waiting for me to grovel, to promise to be less transactional, to write another check to prove that I was good, that I was loyal, that I was worthy of the name Walsh. I took a deep breath. The air in the room smelled of rosemary and expensive perfume and rot. I placed my hands on the edge of the table. "Okay," I said. The word hung in the air. Deborah blinked, slightly confused. She had expected a fight. She had expected a long, drawn-out argument where she could play the martyr and I could play the villain, ending with me apologizing and buying dessert. She was not prepared for agreement. "Okay," she asked, her brow furrowing. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor. A harsh, grating sound that made everyone jump. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my dress. I picked up my purse from the floor beside me. "You are right, Mom," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used in boardrooms when I delivered bad news to CEOs who thought they were invincible. It was a voice devoid of tremor, devoid of heat. It was the voice of absolute finality. I have been relying on this family too much. I have been using money to control you. I have been toxic, and if you want me to stop relying on you, then I will respect your wishes." "Where are you going?" Grant asked, his smugness slipping just a fraction. "We haven't had pie." "I am leaving," I said. "I am going to stop relying on you for company. I am going to stop relying on you for holiday memories. I am going to give you exactly what you asked for." I looked at Deborah one last time. "You want independence from me. You have got it." "Elena, sit down," my father said, speaking for the first time. His voice was weak, pleading. "Don't make a scene." "There is no scene, Dad," I said. "Mom asked me to do something. I am doing it." I turned my back on the table. I walked out of the dining room, through the foyer where the family photos hung photos that I had paid to have framed. I grabbed my coat from the rack. "If you walk out that door," my mother called out, her voice rising, sharp and shrill. "Do not expect us to come running after you. You are being childish. Elena, you are ruining Christmas." I buttoned my coat. I did not look back. I opened the heavy oak front door and stepped out into the biting Wisconsin cold. "Okay," I whispered to the empty porch. "I will stop." I closed the door behind me. The latch clicked shut. It was the quietest sound in the world, and yet it sounded like the striking of a match. The cold air of the porch hit me like a physical blow, shocking my lungs, but it was nothing compared to the clarity that was currently crystallizing in my mind. I stood there for a moment, my hand still hovering near the brass knocker, listening to the muffled sounds of the house I had just exiled myself from. I could hear the scraping of chairs, the clinking of silverware resuming its rhythm. They were going back to their meal. The disruption was over. The problem me had removed itself, and now the Walsh family could return to its preferred state of delusional grandeur. As I walked down the salt-stained concrete of the driveway toward my sedan, the irony of the last 16 years washed over me. I left this house when I was 18 years old, with a scholarship to a state university and a grim determination to never ask Kenneth or Deborah Walsh for a single dime. I had seen how money worked in this house. I had seen how my mother used it as a leash, how my father used it as a shield. I wanted none of it. I worked double shifts at a campus coffee shop. I graded papers. I lived on ramen noodles and cheap adrenaline. I built a life on the premise that I would be the independent one, the one who stood on her own 2 feet. Somewhere along the line, the script had flipped without me noticing. I had become the foundation, and they had become the dependents. My mother, Deborah, had constructed what I often thought of as an emotional monarchy. It was a kingdom built on approval. If you pleased the queen, you were granted a temporary basking in her warmth. If you displeased her, you were cast into the Siberian winter of her silence. Growing up, I learned that affection was not a baseline, it was a currency, and the exchange rate was volatile. Grant was the crown prince. He was 4 years older than me, and in my mother's eyes, he could do no wrong. He was always the victim of circumstance, the brilliant entrepreneur who was just one lucky break away from greatness. But the breaks never came. The failures did. I remembered the phone call 3 years ago. It was a Tuesday night. Grant had started a boutique craft brewery that was going to revolutionize the local beer scene. The only thing it revolutionized was the speed at which capital could vanish. He had called me, his voice thick with panic, explaining that he had leveraged his credit cards to the limit and the suppliers were threatening to sue. "Mom can't know, Elena," he had begged. "It would kill her." It would not have killed her, but it would have shattered the illusion she had crafted around him. So, I stepped in. I wired $8,000 to a business account that no longer exists. I told myself I was saving my brother. In reality, I was paying a premium to keep my mother's fantasy intact. Grant never paid me back. He never even brought it up again. In his mind, the money was just a resource that had appeared because he deserved it. Then there was Lucas. If Grant was the prince, Lucas was the court jester who knew exactly how to manipulate the king and queen. He was the baby, the sensitive soul, the one who needed extra support, because the world was just too harsh for his artistic temperament. Lucas had mastered the art of weaponized incompetence. He knew that if he looked helpless enough, someone would pick up the slack. That someone was usually me. I unlocked my car door but didn't get in immediately. I looked back at the house. The living room window was glowing warm and yellow. I could picture them inside. I could picture the spreadsheet that existed on my encrypted laptop drive, the one file I never opened in front of anyone. I named the file Family Buffer, in the privacy of my own head. I called it the Peace Fund. It was a meticulous accounting of every dollar I had bled into that house to keep the walls from caving in. It was not just the big checks. It was the slow, steady drip of subsidies that they had come to view as natural rights. There was the property tax bill from 2 years ago. My father had forgotten to file the exemption paperwork, and the penalty was steep. I paid $3,400 to the county treasurer to keep a lien off the house. There was the roof. When the shingles started curling and the attic began to smell of mildew, my mother had simply sighed and said she supposed they would just have to put buckets out because fixed incomes do not stretch to slate repairs. I hired the contractors. I paid the $12,000 invoice. I even paid for the upgraded insulation so their heating bills would be lower. There was the health insurance. My father's heart condition required a specific blood thinner that their basic Medicare plan barely touched. Every 90 days, I transferred $600 to my father's checking account. The memo line always read, "Gift." It was not a gift. It was a subscription fee for his survival. And Lucas, my sweet, manipulative brother Lucas, he was ostensibly working on a master's degree in digital media, a program that seemed to stretch on indefinitely. I was the authorized payer on his university portal. I paid the semester fees. I paid the technology levies. I paid for the high-end laptop he claimed was essential for his rendering software, the same laptop I suspected was used primarily for gaming and streaming movies. I had done all of this for a simple, pathetic reason. I thought that if I provided enough value, I would be indispensable. I thought that if I paved the road they walked on, they might occasionally look down and appreciate the asphalt. I was wrong. The more I gave, the less they saw it as a gift. It became an entitlement. My generosity had metastasized into their expectation. To them, I wasn't a benefactor. I was a utility. When you flip a light switch, you do not thank the power company. You only curse them when the bulb stays dark. Today, at lunch, I had dared to flicker, and they had tried to replace me. I sat in the driver's seat and closed the door, sealing myself inside the quiet leather interior. The silence here was different. It was clean. My hands gripped the steering wheel, sensing the texture of the leather. My mind drifted to the one asset that terrified me the most, the one piece of leverage that was so large, so devastating, that its existence was the only thing keeping me from screaming. Kestrel Ridge Lodge, the family legend, repeated at every Christmas party and every Thanksgiving dinner, was that the lodge was the Walsh legacy. It was a stunning A-frame cabin sitting on 3 acres of prime waterfront property on Lake Kestrel, about 2 hours north of here. My grandfather had built the original structure, and my parents treated it like their ancestral manor. It was where they spent their summers. It was where Grant took his dates to impress them. It was where Lucas went to find his muse. They projected an image of landed gentry, of old money that held onto vacation homes through generations. The truth was a rotting pile of paperwork that sat in a fireproof box in my apartment in Madison. 5 years ago, Kestrel Ridge was on the auction block. My parents had leveraged the property twice to cover Grant's earlier failures and to pay for a lifestyle they could not afford. They had stopped paying the property taxes 3 years prior to that. The county had initiated foreclosure proceedings. I found out by accident when a notice was sent to the house while I was visiting, and I saw the sheriff's seal on the envelope. I remembered the terror in my mother's eyes that day. For the first time, her mask had slipped completely. "We will lose our standing," she had whispered. "Everyone in town knows that place is ours. If we lose it, we are nothing." She didn't care about the house. She cared about the optics. So, I fixed it. I drained my savings. I liquidated a portion of my stock portfolio. I hired a lawyer named Carmen Hayes, a woman who was as sharp as a razor and twice as cold. We negotiated with the bank. We negotiated with the county. I paid off the liens. I paid off the back taxes. I paid off the secondary mortgage. But Carmen had insisted on a structure that my parents, in their desperation, had barely read. They signed the papers because they wanted the problem to go away. They signed because they assumed I was just being a good daughter, cleaning up their mess like I always did. Technically, on public record, the deed was held in a trust to protect the family privacy, but the beneficiary of that trust, the sole entity with the power to revoke usage rights and liquidate the asset, was not Kenneth Walsh. It was not Deborah Walsh. It was Elena Walsh. I owned the roof over their vacationing heads. I owned the dock where Grant parked his boat. I owned the fireplace where my mother posed for her holiday cards. I had never exercised that power. I never even mentioned it. I let them play pretend. I let them strut around the lake, telling the neighbors about our family cottage, because I wanted them to feel secure. I wanted to believe that by saving their sanctuary, I was buying my place at their table. I looked at the house again through the windshield. The snow was beginning to fall harder now. dusting the hood of my car with white powder. They had told me to stop relying on the family. They had told me I was controlling. They had told me I was nothing but a checkbook. I reached for the ignition, but before I pressed the button, I saw movement in the front window. Grant and Lucas were standing there, watching my car. I could not hear them, but I knew the cadence of their body language. I saw Grant gesture vaguely with his hand, a dismissive wave. I saw Lucas laugh. I imagined what they were saying. It was likely the same thing they always said when I asserted a boundary that eventually collapsed under the weight of my own guilt. She is just throwing a tantrum. Give her a week. She will be back to fix the radiator. She will be back to pay the tuition. She needs us too much. A smile touched my lips. It felt foreign, tight, but genuine. It was not a smile of amusement. It was the smile of a demolition expert who has just realized the building is already wired, and the detonator is sitting in her lap. "No," I said softly to the glass that separated me from them. "Not this time." I pressed the start button. The engine purred to life, a low, steady rumble of refined engineering. I shifted the car into reverse. The backup camera flickered on, showing the distorted, wide-angle view of the house receding behind me. I did not slam on the gas. I did not peel out of the driveway in a fit of rage. I drove slowly, deliberately, navigating the suburban streets with the precision of a woman who has nowhere to be but her own life. I checked the time on the dashboard. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The banks were closed for the holiday. The county offices were closed. The utility companies were running on automated systems. That was fine. Automation was my specialty. I turned onto the highway, merging into the sparse traffic heading south toward Madison. The heater kicked in, blowing warm air over my cold hands. I thought about the family buffer spreadsheet. I thought about the peace fund. I decided that peace was too expensive. It was time to audit the account, and this time, the audit would be total. The road ahead was gray and straight, cutting through the winter landscape. For the first time in years, I did not feel the crushing weight of obligations sitting in the passenger seat. I felt light. I felt dangerous. I reached over and turned on the radio. It was playing a generic holiday pop song, something about coming home. I turned the volume down until it was just a hum. I didn't need a soundtrack. I needed to concentrate. As the mileage between me and Pinebrook increased, I began to formulate the sequence of events. First, the utilities, then the recurring transfers, then the credit freeze. And finally, when they were cold and desperate and confused, we would talk about the lodge. We would talk about Kestrel Ridge. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, though the town was long gone, swallowed by the horizon and the snow. "You wanted independence," I said to the empty car. "I hope you can afford it." The highway was a gray ribbon unspooling beneath my tires, stretching out into the flat, white horizon of Wisconsin. The snow had started to stick, transforming the landscape into a blurred sheet of static. But inside the car, the only weather was the relentless, vibrating storm emanating from my center console. My phone would not stop buzzing. It rattled against the hard plastic of the cup holder. It was a rhythmic, aggressive sound, like an angry insect demanding to be let out. I did not look at the screen, but I knew the choreography of the notifications. I knew the sequence. First, it would be my mother, calling to demand I turn the car around, her voice likely pitched somewhere between rage and performative victimhood. Then, it would be Grant, calling to scold me for upsetting her, for ruining the aesthetic of the holiday. Finally, there would be texts from Lucas, little digital barbs meant to hook into my guilt and reel me back in. I kept my eyes on the road. The windshield wipers swiped back and forth, a steady metronome counting down the miles between who I was at that table and who I was becoming. I waited for the crash. I had seen enough movies and read enough novels to know how this scene was supposed to go. This was the part where the protagonist pulls over to the shoulder, grips the steering wheel until her knuckles turn white, and breaks down in ugly, heaving sobs. This was supposed to be the moment of devastation, the realization that I was truly alone in the world. I braced myself for the grief. I waited for the hot sting of tears to blur my vision, but the miles ticked by 10, 20, 30, and my eyes remained dry. There was no grief. There was no crushing sense of loss. Instead, there was a physical sensation of lightness so profound it almost made me dizzy. It felt as if I had been hiking up a mountain for 2 decades carrying a backpack filled with lead bricks, and someone had just reached over and cut the straps. I could breathe. My chest expanded fully, pressing against the seatbelt, filling with air that felt cleaner than anything I had inhaled in years. I glanced at the phone again as it lit up with a text message. The preview flashed on the lock screen. It was Lucas. "You are being dramatic. Mom is crying. Come back and fix this." "Fix this," I said aloud to the empty car. My voice was steady. That was it. That was the summary of my existence in their eyes. I was not a person. I was the fix. I was the mechanic who came in to tighten the bolts and grease the gears so the machine of their dysfunction could keep grinding along. They did not miss me. They missed the maintenance. They were not panicking because their daughter and sister was gone. They were panicking because the service engine light had just turned on. "They only miss me when the power is about to be cut," I whispered. I drove the remaining 40 miles in silence. By the time I reached the outskirts of Madison, the sky had turned a bruised purple. The early winter twilight settling over the city, I navigated the familiar streets to my apartment complex. It was a modern building, sharp angles and glass, a place that my mother called sterile and my brother Grant called soulless. I pulled into my assigned parking spot in the underground garage. The heavy concrete pillars, the hum of the ventilation system, the swipe of my key fob. These things were usually mundane. Tonight, they felt like fortifications. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. I walked down the quiet hallway. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. The air in my apartment smelled of lemon verbena and silence. I stood in the entryway and just looked. The hardwood floors were clean. The throw blanket on the sofa was folded exactly how I had left it. There were no dishes in the sink. There was no passive-aggressive tension hanging in the air. There was no one here waiting to critique my outfit, or ask for a loan, or tell me I was taking up too much space. For years, I had let them convince me that this life, my life, was sad. They painted my independence as isolation. They made me feel that coming home to an empty apartment was a failure, a sign that I was unlovable. Now, standing here, I saw it for what it was. It was not isolation. It was sanctuary. It was proof. I walked into the bathroom and turned on the harsh vanity lights. I leaned over the sink and looked at myself in the mirror. I scrutinized the woman staring back. I looked for the heartbreak. I looked for the shattered daughter. I did not see her. I saw a woman with dark hair and tired eyes. Yes, but the eyes were clear. The set of the jaw was firm. I looked at myself and realized that for the last 16 years, I had not been a victim of bad luck or a difficult family dynamic. I had been a mark. I had been the target of a long con, perpetrated by the people who were supposed to protect me. "You were not unloved," I told my reflection. "You were just under contract." And the contract had just been voided. I walked out of the bathroom and sat down on the edge of my sofa. I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket. It was still warm from the battery working overtime to process the incoming barrage of communication. I swiped the screen open. 7 missed calls from Mom. 4 missed calls from Grant. 12 text messages from Lucas. 1 voicemail from my father. I did not listen to the voicemail. I did not read the texts. I did not want to hear their voices in my head anymore. I wanted silence. I went into the settings menu. My thumb hovered over the Do Not Disturb toggle. I flipped it. The moon icon appeared in the corner of the screen. A small digital shield. But that was not enough. Silence was temporary. I needed a wall. I opened my contact list. I scrolled to Deborah Walsh. I tapped the information icon. I scrolled down to the bottom in red letters. Block this caller. I pressed it. A confirmation box popped up, asking if I was sure. I did not hesitate. I tapped Block Contact. I did the same for Grant. Block Contact. I did the same for Lucas. Block Contact. Then I scrolled to Dad. My thumb paused. I felt a flicker of the old guilt, a small, weak pulse of hesitation. My father was not malicious. He was not the one who fired the arrows. He just stood by and watched them land. He was the quiet one. He was the one who would sneak me a candy bar after Mom sent me to my room without dinner. But he was also the one who sat there today and said nothing while his wife told me I was a leech. He was the one who enjoyed the heat I paid for and the medicine I bought, all while letting me be the villain. Silence is not neutrality. Silence is complicit. By saying nothing, he had chosen his side. He had chosen the path of least resistance, and that path led away from me. I pressed block contact. The list was grayed out. The digital noise ceased. The device in my hand was no longer a leash. It was just a piece of glass and metal. I set the phone down on the coffee table. I stood up and walked to my small home office area in the corner of the living room. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, another thing I had bought for myself because I valued my spine. Unlike my family who expected others to carry them, I opened my laptop. The screen came to life, the white light illuminating the dark room. I did not turn on the overhead lights. I liked the shadows. They felt appropriate. I cracked my knuckles. It was a habit I usually suppressed. But tonight, I let the sound echo in the room. I placed my hands on the keyboard. I felt like a surgeon scrubbing in. I felt like a pilot running the pre-flight check before a steep ascent. "The contract has expired," I murmured. I made a silent vow then and there. I would not scream. I would not slash tires. I would not go on social media and air the family laundry. I would not stoop to their level of emotional brawling. Revenge, for me, would not be an act of aggression. It would be an act of cessation. I would simply stop catching them. I would remove the net. I would remove the scaffolding. I would let gravity take over. If they could fly on their own, as they claimed they could, then they would be fine. If they crashed, it would be because they had built their lives on air. I navigated to my file manager. I right-clicked on the desktop and selected New Folder. I named it Evidence. I stared at the folder icon for a moment. This was the most important step. In the past, whenever I tried to set a boundary, my mother would gaslight me. She would rewrite history. She would claim she never asked for money, or that I had offered it, or that I was remembering things wrong because I was too sensitive. Not this time. This time, there would be a paper trail. This time, the truth would be immutable. I began to drag files. I opened my banking portal. I downloaded the statements for the last 5 years. I renamed them by year and month. I dragged them into the folder. I opened my email archive. I searched for grant and loan. I found dozens of threads, the pleas, the promises to pay back, the excuses when the deadline passed. I printed them to PDF. I dragged them into the folder. I searched for Lucas and tuition. I found the confirmation emails from the university bursar's office, the ones sent to me because my email was the primary contact for billing. I dragged them into the folder. I searched for mom and urgent. The results were a scrolling list of crises: the roof, the car repair, the medical deductible, the time she needed a dress for a wedding she couldn't afford to attend. I saved every receipt. I saved every transfer confirmation number. I worked for 2 hours. The only sound in the apartment was the clicking of the mouse and the tapping of keys. It was methodical work. It was data entry. It was risk assessment in reverse. I was cataloging the losses I had already sustained to prevent any future exposure. I created a subfolder named Lodge. Into this folder, I moved the most dangerous documents of all: the tax redemption certificates, the mechanics' liens releases, the correspondence with Carmen Hayes, my lawyer, the scan of the springing transfer agreement that my parents had signed with shaking hands 5 years ago. I looked at the file names: Walsh Lodge Deed Transfer Trigger Clause PDF. This was not just paperwork. This was the nuclear option. When I was finished, the folder contained hundreds of files. It was a gigabyte of proof that I was not the parasite. It was a digital monument to my exploitation. I backed the folder up to the cloud. Then I backed it up to an external hard drive. Then I encrypted both. I closed the laptop. The room went dark again, save for the city lights filtering in through the blinds. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water from the tap. The water was cold. I drank it in one long swallow, feeling the chill run down my throat, cooling the fire that had been burning in my stomach since lunch. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. I felt strong. I felt terrifyingly capable. I looked toward the window, looking north, back toward Pinebrook, back toward the house where the heating system was currently running on a bill that was in my name, where the internet they were using to badmouth me was paid for by my credit card. "You want independence?" I whispered into the quiet dark. "Okay, you have got it." The blue light of the laptop screen was the only illumination in my living room, casting long, sharp shadows against the wall. I felt like a hacker in a spy movie, except I was not breaking into a foreign government's mainframe. I was breaking out of my own family's parasitic embrace. I opened the spreadsheet. Family buffer, seeing it on the high-resolution display, stripped of the emotional fog of the holidays, was like looking at a crime scene photo. The columns were red. The rows were endless. It was not a budget. It was an autopsy of my financial independence. I scrolled down, my eyes tracking the recurring monthly expenses that I had absorbed so gradually that I had ceased to feel their weight. Rent assistance, tuition, utilities, insurance, streaming services, cell phone plans. It was a map of exploitation. I cracked my knuckles again. I did not feel guilt. I felt the cold, hard precision of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. I was a senior risk analyst. My job was to identify liabilities and neutralize them. Tonight, the Walsh family was the liability. I started with the utilities. I navigated to the web portal for the power and gas company that serviced the Pinebrook area. My browser auto-filled the login credentials because, of course, I was the one who managed the account. I clicked on the Service Management tab. The screen showed the current usage. They had the heat cranked up to 74 degrees. I could see the spike on the daily graph. I was paying for them to walk around in t-shirts while it snowed outside. I did not select disconnect service. That would be petty, and it would give them ammunition to call the police or claim I was endangering my father's health. I chose a different option. Transfer of billing responsibility. The form was simple. It asked for the date the change should take effect. I typed in tomorrow's date. It asked for the contact information of the new responsible party. I typed in Kenneth Walsh. I typed in his email address. I typed in his cell phone number. I hesitated for a fraction of a second over the submit button. My father did not check his email often. He would likely miss the notification until the physical letter arrived, or until the first overdue notice showed up. That was a risk he was going to have to manage. Click, the screen refreshed. Request submitted. Confirmation email sent to Kenneth Walsh. Next, the water and sewer. Same process, same recipient, same date. Then, the telecommunications. I logged into the cable provider's website. This account was particularly offensive. It was the Platinum Tier package. It included every premium movie channel, the deluxe sports package for Grant, and the gigabit internet speed for Lucas's gaming. $340 a month. I clicked Change Plan. The website tried to fight me. It offered me discounts. It offered me a free month. A chatbot popped up in the corner, asking, "Elena, are you sure you want to make changes today?" I typed, "I no longer reside at this address." It was the truth. I did not reside there emotionally, and I certainly was not going to reside there financially. I selected Cancel Service. The system warned me about early termination fees. I checked the contract date. The contract had expired 4 months ago. We were month to month. There were no fees. The final confirmation screen appeared. "Your service will be disconnected at 12 midnight. I pressed Confirm. Grant would lose his sports channel in less than 5 hours. Mom would lose her premium movies. Lucas would lose his high-speed connection to the virtual world. Good. Maybe they could talk to each other. I moved on to the banking portal. This was where the bleeding was most direct. I logged into my primary checking account and navigated to Scheduled Transfers. There it was, right at the top. Grant Assistance. I clicked on the details. I had set this up 2 years ago. The memo line said, Temporary help. It was set to transfer $400 on the first of every month. I did the math in my head. 2 years, 24 months, $9,600. That was a down payment on a house. That was a trip to Europe. That was my retirement fund. I hovered my mouse over the trash can icon. My finger twitched. I could hear Grant's voice in my head, the way he would sound when he realized the money hadn't arrived. Elena, come on. I just need a little more time. The business is about to turn a corner. The business was a corpse. I was just paying for the funeral over and over again. I clicked the mouse. Are you sure you want to delete this recurring transfer? Yes, I said to the screen. The line item vanished. The balance on the screen remained the same. But the future balance, the one that mattered, just grew. Next, the insurance. I opened the app for my car insurance provider. I had a multi-car policy. It was cheaper that way. Mom had said, we get a bundle discount. I scrolled down to vehicles. There was my sedan, and there, below it, was a 2018 Ford F-150. Grant's truck. I clicked Edit Policy. I selected the truck. I selected Remove Vehicle. The app calculated the difference. A number popped up in green text. New monthly premium, $112. My current premium was nearly $300. I had been paying almost $200 a month to insure a vehicle I did not drive. For a driver who had 2 speeding tickets on his record tickets that I had paid the fines for to keep his license from being suspended. I confirmed the change. The green number locked in. I took a deep breath. My lungs filled with air. And for the first time in years, the breath didn't catch on a snag of anxiety. It was a physical release, a tangible drop in pressure. Now for Lucas. I opened a new tab. The university student portal. The interface was clunky, designed by the lowest bidder. I had to go through a 2-factor authentication process just to get in. I navigated to student accounts. I saw the balance for the upcoming spring semester, $12,000. I saw the payment method saved on file. There was only one, a Visa ending in 4092, my card. I saw the checkbox marked Authorized Payer. Lucas had given me this access so I could help him out with books and fees. He had never once logged in to pay a bill himself. I clicked Manage Payment Methods. I deleted the card. Then I went to Payer Access. I saw my name listed. I clicked Remove. The system asked for a reason. I didn't type one. I just confirmed. Lucas would get an email notification within minutes. Your authorized payer has been removed. He would probably think it was a glitch. He would call me in the morning, acting confused, acting innocent. I wouldn't answer. I was not done. There was one more direct line to sever. My mother's credit card. It was an authorized user card on my primary travel rewards account. I had given it to her 3 years ago for emergencies. I opened the credit card statement. I scrolled through the recent transactions. Pinebrook Liquor and Wine, $80. Home Goods, $140. Bella's Salon, $90. Emergencies. She was using my credit score to finance her lifestyle, and I was paying the bill every month to avoid the interest and the confrontation. I clicked Account Services. I clicked Manage Authorized Users. I selected Deborah Walsh. Remove User. The bank's warning was severe. The card will be deactivated immediately. Any recurring charges attached to this card will be declined. I thought about the embarrassment she would feel the next time she tried to whip that card out at the country club lunch. I thought about the declined message flashing on the terminal. It was cruel. I knew it was cruel. But it was also the only language she understood. She dealt in social currency and shame. I was simply adjusting the exchange rate. Click. User removed. I sat back in my chair. The heavy lifting was done, but as a risk analyst, I knew that when you corner a desperate animal, it bites. When you cut off a flow of resources, the dependent party will try to find a workaround. They knew my birthday. They knew my mother's maiden name. They knew the name of the street I grew up on. They had all the answers to the standard security questions. If Grant got desperate enough, would he try to open a line of credit in my name? If Mom panicked, would she try to call the bank and impersonate me? I could not take that chance. I opened 3 new tabs: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. I went through the process for each one. I verified my identity. I answered the questions about my previous addresses and my car loan. Place a security freeze. I created a PIN for each bureau, a complex, random string of numbers that had no connection to my birthday or my anniversary or anything the Walsh family could guess. I wrote the PINs down on a piece of paper, not in a digital file. I folded the paper and put it in my physical safe under my desk. Freeze confirmed. My credit was now a fortress. No one could open a loan, a credit card, or a utility account in my name without that PIN. I had locked the gates. I looked at the clock. It was 1 a.m. I had been working for an hour. In 60 minutes, I had dismantled a financial structure that had taken a decade to build. I opened my email client. I composed a new message. To Elena Walsh. Subject protocol for contact. Elena, from this moment forward, you do not engage with them financially. You do not engage with them emotionally. If they contact you about money, the answer is no. If they contact you about the lodge, refer to the springing transfer clause. If they attempt to access your accounts, contact the fraud department immediately. Do not negotiate. Do not justify. Do not explain. Only communicate via legal counsel if assets are involved. I hit send. It was a contract with myself. I opened the calculator app. I began to punch in the numbers. The mortgage subsidy I was saving for Grant, the insurance, the phone plan, the cable, the utilities, the tuition payments, the credit card emergencies. I hit the equal sign. The number stared back at me in white text on a black background. $3,850. That was the monthly cost of being a Walsh. That was the tax I had been paying for the privilege of being treated like a servant. $46,000 a year. I stared at the number. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming realization of what I had been doing to myself. I could have bought a house. I could have traveled the world. I could have started my own firm. Instead, I had bought them roast duck and premium cable. I closed the laptop. The blue light vanished, plunging the room into darkness. I did not feel greedy looking at that number. I did not feel like a miser. I felt like a hostage who had just cut the ropes. That is not savings, I whispered to the dark room. That is my life. I stood up and walked to the window. The snow was still falling, covering the city in a blanket of white. Somewhere in Pinebrook, a cable box was about to flicker and die. Somewhere in a server farm, a recurring transfer was being erased. I placed my hand against the cold glass. I was free, and tomorrow, they would find out just how expensive their independence really was. I woke up the next morning to a silence that felt expensive. My apartment was still, the air conditioner humming a low, steady note of climate-controlled stability. There was no chaos here. There was no one banging on the bathroom door, no one asking where the coffee filters were, no one sighing loudly in the kitchen to announce their martyrdom. I made myself a cup of dark roast coffee. I stood by the window and watched the Madison traffic crawl along the snowy streets below. It was a Tuesday. For the rest of the world, it was just a workday. For the Walsh family, it was the first day of the Ice Age. I picked up my phone. I had kept the blocks in place, but I had left the blocked messages folder accessible. I needed to monitor the threat level. It was a professional habit. You do not simply ignore a volatile variable. You track it. The first message had come in at 7:30 in the morning. It was from my mother. Call me right now. You are acting like a child. This is ridiculous. I took a sip of coffee. The irony was rich. She called me a child. Yet she was the one demanding attention because the world was no longer catering to her whims. She did not ask if I was safe. She did not ask why I had left. She demanded compliance. I archived the message without replying. By 10 o'clock, I was at my desk at Arkstone Risk Solutions. I was reviewing an actuarial table for a mid-sized logistics firm that was operating with too much debt. The parallels to my own biological family were not lost on me, but I pushed them aside. I was paid to be objective here. My phone vibrated on the desk. It was a notification from my insurance provider. A secure message. Policy update vehicle removed. Adjustment processed. 10 minutes later, the voicemail notification popped up. It was from a number I did not recognize, which meant it bypassed my block list. I put my headset on and clicked play. Elena. It was Grant. His voice was high, tight with a mixture of panic and fury. There was wind noise in the background, the sound of cars rushing by. "What the hell did you do? I just got pulled over on the interstate. The cop ran my plates. He said the insurance is void." Void. He almost impounded the truck. Elena. I had to talk my way out of it for 20 minutes. I am standing on the side of the road, freezing my hands off. You can't just cancel insurance without telling people that is illegal. Fix this. Call the agent and tell them it was a mistake. I took a sip of water. It was not illegal. I was the policyholder. He was a permitted driver on my policy. I had every right to remove a liability. And Grant was a liability. I imagined him standing on the shoulder of I-94, his breath puffing in the cold air. The state trooper writing him a citation for driving without proof of financial responsibility. For years, I had shielded him from this exact moment. I had paid the premiums. I had paid the deductibles. I had ensured that his bad luck never turned into legal consequences. Today, the shield was gone. I did not call the agent. I did not call Grant. I went back to my actuarial table. The logistics firm had a 40% chance of default in the next 2 quarters. Grant's probability of default was 100%. At noon, the next domino fell. Lucas, my younger brother, had been bragging for weeks about his New Year's plans. He was taking a group of his influencer friends up to Kestrel Ridge Lodge. He had promised them a luxury getaway. He had promised them a rustic chic experience with a roaring fire and gourmet hot chocolate, all engineered to look perfect on social media. I checked the weather report for the Kestrel Lake area. It was 7 degrees below zero with a wind chill of 20. I had canceled the automatic propane delivery yesterday afternoon. The local gas company was very efficient. When I told them I was the owner and I was closing the account for the season, they had likely remotely locked the regulator or simply canceled the scheduled fill-up that was due today. My phone lit up. It was Lucas. He was calling from a friend's phone. Clever enough to know I wouldn't answer his. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. "Elena, pick up. It is freezing in here. The thermostat is dead. The gas fireplace won't turn on. There is no hot water. We have been here for an hour and we can see our breath in the living room. My friends are freaking out. They are saying I lured them to a freezer. Dad said you messed with the utilities. Turn it back on. I cannot look like an idiot in front of these people." I deleted the voicemail. He called again immediately. This time, I answered. I needed to set the perimeter. "Hello?" I said, my voice calm, professional. "You crazy witch," Lucas screamed. "Turn the heat on. We are dying up here." "The account is closed." "Lucas," I said. I typed a sentence into my work report as I spoke. "I am not paying for the gas anymore. If you want heat, you need to call the provider and open an account in your own name. They will probably require a deposit and a credit check." "I don't have a deposit," he shrieked. "I am a student. You know I don't have that kind of money. You have to pay it. It is the family house." "It is my house," I corrected him. "And the heat is a service. Services cost money. You are ruining my trip. You are ruining everything. Why are you doing this?" "Lucas," I said, cutting through his hysteria with a voice like a knife through soft butter. "Adults pay for heat. If you cannot afford the gas, I suggest you put on a coat, or leave." I hung up. I stared at the phone for a second. I waited for the guilt. I waited for the image of my baby brother shivering to break my resolve. But then I remembered the $80 bottle of wine he had opened at lunch yesterday without asking. I remembered him mocking me for being intense while I paid his tuition. He was not freezing because I was cruel. He was freezing because he had assumed warmth was a natural law, not a purchased commodity. He was learning physics. The afternoon dragged on. I stayed at my desk, working through lunch. I was more productive than I had been in months. The mental bandwidth I usually dedicated to managing my family's crises, wondering if Dad took his meds, wondering if Mom was offended by my tone, wondering if Grant needed bail money, was suddenly free. I felt like a computer that had just closed 50 background applications. At 3 o'clock, my father weighed in. He did not call. He left a voicemail. That was Kenneth Walsh's style. Avoidance. Elena, his voice sounded weary, old. This has gone too far. Your mother is very upset. Grant is having a hard time. Look, we can talk about this, but you need to be reasonable. You cannot just cut people off like this. It is not how families work. Just turn the utilities back to the way they were, and we will discuss a budget. Okay, be reasonable. Be reasonable. That was the trap. In my family. Reasonable meant silent. Reasonable meant compliant. Reasonable meant I kept writing the checks, and they kept treating me like a staff member. I did not reply. I forwarded the voicemail to the evidence folder on my laptop. It was proof that they knew I had stopped paying. They could not claim ignorance later. By 5 o'clock, the war had moved to a new front: social media. I did not have a Facebook account. I found it to be a security risk, but I had a burner account I used for background checks on potential clients. I logged in and navigated to Deborah Walsh's profile. There it was, posted 20 minutes ago. It is sharper than a serpent's tooth to have a thankless child. You give them everything. You sacrifice your own happiness. And in your hour of need, they turn their back on you, praying for strength today. The devil works hard. But a mother's love is stronger. Sad to see greed destroy a family. Below it, a chorus of comments from her friends. Oh, Deb, I am so sorry. Sending prayers. Is this about E? I always knew she was difficult. My mother was building a narrative. She was painting herself as the martyr and me as the villain. E. She was vague enough to avoid libel, but specific enough to garner sympathy. She wanted the town of Pinebrook to see me as a monster. I felt a cold flash of anger. But I tamped it down. This was bait. She wanted me to comment. She wanted me to fight her in the public square where she could weep and play the victim. I closed the tab. I would not fight her with comments. I would fight her with reality. I left the office at 6. I drove to the gym. I ran 5 miles on the treadmill. I bought a salad for dinner. I went home to my clean, quiet, paid-for apartment. I was sitting on my couch, reading a book, when the climax of the day occurred. It was 8:30 in the evening. My phone buzzed with an alert from my bank app. Transaction declined Visa, ending in 4092. Merchant Pinebrook Market, amount $214.60. I stared at the screen. Pinebrook Market was the high-end grocery store in town. It was the place where you went to be seen. Not just to buy food. My mother went there almost every day. I could picture the scene perfectly. She would be at the checkout counter. She would have a cart full of unnecessary luxuries: imported cheeses, organic produce, maybe a bottle of wine to soothe her nerves after a stressful day of being a victim. She would be chatting with the cashier, or perhaps a neighbor she had run into. She would have reached into her purse and pulled out the platinum card, the card that had my name on it in small print, but which she carried like a scepter. She would have swiped it, or inserted the chip, and the machine would have beeped, a harsh, flat, rejecting sound, declined. She would have smiled nervously. Oh, that is strange. Try it again. The cashier would have tried it again, declined. Maybe the chip is dirty, my mother would say, her voice rising slightly, a flush creeping up her neck. It says, not authorized, Mrs. Walsh, the cashier would say. People in line behind her would start to shift. The neighbor she was talking to would be watching, eyes wide with faux concern that was actually delicious gossip fodder. My mother would have to use her own debit card, the one attached to the joint account with my father. The account that I knew was perilously low because I was no longer topping it up. She would have to put things back, the imported cheese, the wine. She would have to do the walk of shame, putting items aside until the total came down to what she could actually afford. The humiliation would be absolute. For a woman like Deborah Walsh, this was worse than freezing. This was a public death. 2 minutes later, my phone exploded. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a call. It was a security alert from my email provider. Security alert. Suspicious sign-in attempt. Location Pinebrook, Wisconsin, Device unknown, iPhone. Status blocked. They were trying to log in. They were trying to get into my email. Why to find the utility passwords? To access the bank portal, to undo what I had done. My mother had likely stormed home, humiliated and enraged, and ordered Grant or Lucas to fix it. They were trying the shortcut. They thought they could just guess my password, probably trying my birth date or the name of a childhood pet and take back control. They were trying to hack me. This was no longer a family squabble. This was unauthorized access. This was a cybercrime. I did not feel fear. I felt a cold, grim satisfaction. I opened the evidence folder on my laptop. I took a screenshot of the declined transaction notification. I took a screenshot of the failed login attempt with the IP address and location clearly visible. I saved them both. I sat back in the dark. I could feel their desperation radiating from 50 miles away. They were flailing. They were hitting walls they didn't know existed. They were realizing that the world was hard and sharp when you didn't have a buffer wrapped around you. My mother thought shaming me on Facebook would work. My father thought asking me to be reasonable would work. Lucas thought screaming would work. They did not understand that I had changed the operating system. I took a sip of water. I was not going to call them. I was not going to help them. I was going to wait, because now they were desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. They would do something rash. They would escalate. They would try to force the door open, not realizing that I was standing on the other side, holding the deed to the entire building. "Try again," I whispered to the glowing screen of my phone. "Go ahead. Break the law. Make it easy for me." I turned off the lamp. I went to bed. I slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a woman who has finally balanced the books. The morning sun was too bright against the snow, creating a blinding white glare that felt clinical, exposing every crack in the world. I sat in my home office, the shades drawn halfway down, staring at a phone number I had not dialed in 5 years. Carmen Hayes. In the world of corporate litigation and high-stakes estate planning, Carmen was not just a lawyer, she was a ballistics expert in a tailored suit. We had met when I was 29, during the darkest financial period of the Walsh family history, a period my parents had successfully scrubbed from their public narrative. I pressed the call button. It rang twice. "Elena Walsh," Carmen's voice came through the speakerphone, crisp and devoid of surprise. "I was wondering when you would call. I saw the credit inquiries on the monitoring service we set up. You locked down your personal files." "I did," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I locked everything down. Carmen, the utilities, the tuition, the insurance. It is all gone." "Good," Carmen said. I could hear the scratch of a fountain pen on paper. "And the reaction, hostile," I replied. "Attempted unauthorized access to my email, harassment via third parties, public defamation on social media." "Predictable," she murmured. "Desperation makes people sloppy, but you did not call me to tell me your mother is posting vague threats on Facebook. You called me about the asset." "The lodge," I said. "The Kestrel Ridge Lodge," Carmen corrected, her tone shifting into legal precision. "Let's review the file. Shall we?" I closed my eyes and let the memory of 5 years ago wash over me. It was not a warm memory. It was the memory of a rescue mission. My parents had ignored the property tax notices for 3 consecutive years. They had ignored the letters from the bank regarding the secondary mortgage they had taken out to fund Grant's failed tech startup. The county had scheduled the sheriff's sale. The auction was days away. My mother had been hysterical, weeping on the floor of the living room, terrified not of losing the house, but of the neighbors finding out she had lost it. I had stepped in. I had the liquidity. I had the savings. I was ready to write a check for $85,000 to clear the debt and stabilize the structure. But Carmen had stopped me. I remembered sitting in her glass-walled conference room, my pen hovering over the checkbook. Carmen had placed her hand over mine. "Elena," she had said, looking at me with eyes that had seen too many family businesses destroyed by sentimentality. "You are not a charity. If you pay this, you are purchasing equity, and given your family's history, we are not going to trust a handshake deal. We are going to build a trapdoor." Do you have the document handy? Carmen asked now, pulling me back to the present. I have the digital copy in front of me, I said. I opened the file in the evidence folder. Walsh Lodge Deed Transfer Trigger Clause PDF. Refresh my memory on the specific language we used for the springing executory interest, Carmen said. Though I knew she remembered every word, she was testing me. She wanted to make sure I understood the weapon I was holding. The deed is currently held in a blind trust, I recited, reading the text that my parents had signed without reading, too relieved that the money was flowing to pay attention to the fine print. Kenneth and Deborah Walsh retain a life estate, granting them usage rights and the appearance of ownership. Subject to, Carmen prompted, subject to the condition of access and non-hostility. I continued, if the tenants, meaning my parents, take any action to legally or physically bar the guarantor, meaning me, from the premises, or if they attempt to assert exclusive legal ownership in a court of law or public record, the life estate terminates immediately. The deed springs from the trust and records fully in the name of the guarantor. Exactly, Carmen said, her voice dropping an octave. It was my masterpiece. We knew they would eventually turn on you. We knew that once the financial bleeding stopped, their ego would take over. We built a clause that says they can play house as long as they play nice. The moment they try to kick you out of the house you paid for, they evict themselves. I looked at the clause. It was a paragraph of dense legalese, but translated into plain English, it was a guillotine. They have not done it yet, I said. They are angry, but they have not made a formal move against my access to the lodge. Lucas was screaming about the heat being off, but that is a utility dispute, not an ownership dispute. Give them time, Carmen said. You cut off the money. You cut off the prestige. Your mother is currently experiencing a narcissist's collapse. She needs to regain control. She cannot control your bank account anymore. She cannot control your career. What is the one thing she values more than money? Status, I said. The image of the legacy. And the lodge is the physical embodiment of that legacy, Carmen said. She will try to weaponize it. She will think that because her name is on the mailbox, she owns the land. She will try to ban you. She will try to file a restraining order or a trespass notice to hurt you, to show you that you are an outsider. And when she does, when she files a single piece of paper claiming you have no right to be there, Carmen said, she triggers the transfer. It is automatic. We take that filing. We attach it to the pre-signed affidavit we have in the vault, and we walk it down to the county recorder. By the time she gets home, the locks belong to you. I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was not fear. It was the thrill of the hunt. I want to be ready, I said. I do not want to scramble when this happens. I have the package prepared, Carmen said. But you need to bolster the consideration argument. If they fight this in court, they will claim you coerced them. We need to prove that you have held up your end of the bargain for the last 5 years. We need to show that you have acted as the owner in everything but name. I have the receipts, I said. I need more than receipts. Elena, I need a narrative. I want you to print every bank statement from the last 60 months. Highlight every line item related to the lodge, the taxes, the insurance, the roof repair, the dock maintenance, the landscaping fees. I want a binder 3 inches thick that proves you are the only reason that building is not a pile of termite-infested wood. I will have it on your desk by tomorrow morning, I promised. Good. And Elena? Yes. Do not warn them, Carmen said sharply. If you tell them about the clause, they will not pull the trigger. They will just make your life miserable in other ways. You have to let them walk into the trap. You have to let them believe they are striking a death blow against you. If they hit me with the law, they open the door for me. I repeated the advice she had given me years ago. Precisely. Silence is your best strategy. Let them scream. You just document. We ended the call. I spent the next 4 hours turning my printer into an industrial production line. I went through the banking portal again, but this time I was digging deeper than the monthly allowances. I found the cashier's check for $85,000 from 5 years ago. I found the $20,000 transfer for the foundation repair. I found the $6,000 for the new septic system. I printed them all. I bought a heavy-duty binder from the supply closet. I punched holes in the pages. The stack of paper was dense, heavy, smelling of warm toner. I created tabs, capital improvements, tax redemption, maintenance, insurance. It was not just a financial record, it was a moral argument. It showed that while they were drinking wine on the deck and taking photos for Instagram, I was paying for the wood beneath their feet. I placed the binder on the corner of my desk. It looked like a tombstone. Then, I turned my attention to surveillance. I could not legally record inside the lodge now that I wasn't physically there. And I had cut the internet, so the internal smart cameras were offline. But I was a risk analyst. I believed in redundancy. 3 years ago, after a string of break-ins in the vacation community, I had installed a perimeter security system that ran on a cellular backup battery. It was independent of the house power and the house Wi-Fi. It was mounted on the utility pole at the edge of the driveway, technically on the easement. Looking down at the entrance, my parents had forgotten it existed. They thought it was just a motion light. I logged into the security app on my phone. The feed was grainy, but it was live. I could see the driveway covered in snow. I could see Grant's truck was not there. The house looked dark and cold. I adjusted the settings. Motion alert. High sensitivity. Cloud recording continuous. If anyone showed up to change a lock, or if a police officer arrived to serve a notice, I would know instantly. I also set up a logic trap on my own phone. I downloaded an app that exported text message threads into court-admissible PDF formats. I synced it with my cloud account. Every time Lucas sent a threat, every time my mother sent a guilt trip monologue, it was automatically formatted, time-stamped, and archived in the evidence folder. I was letting the evidence gather itself. I stood up and walked to the living room. On the mantel, tucked away in the corner, was a small framed photograph of the lodge. I had taken it myself, years ago, on an early autumn morning when the lake was like glass and the leaves were turning gold. In the photo, the house looked peaceful. It looked like the kind of place where a happy family lived. For years, I had looked at that photo and felt a pang of longing. I had wanted to belong to the people inside that house. I had paid the taxes and the repairs because I thought I was buying an admission ticket to their love. I picked up the frame. The glass was cool against my fingertips. I realized now that I had been looking at it all wrong. It was not a home. It was an asset. It was a piece of real estate that I had saved from their incompetence. My mother was going to try to take it from me. I knew it as surely as I knew the sun would set. She would feel the sting of the credit card decline, the sting of the cold radiators, and she would lash out. She would want to hurt me where she thought I was weakest. She thought I loved the lodge because of the memories. She was wrong. I loved the lodge because it was the one thing in our family that was real. It was wood and stone and glass. It did not lie. It did not manipulate. It just stood there, surviving the winter, exactly like me. "Go ahead, Mom," I whispered to the photo. "Make your move. Try to ban me." I placed the photo back on the mantel. I was not afraid of her anger anymore. I was not afraid of her lawyers. I had the binder. I had the springing transfer clause. I had Carmen Hayes. I checked my watch. It was late afternoon. The silence from Pinebrook was deepening. It was the calm before the storm. They were regrouping. They were likely sitting in the cold living room of the main house right now, wrapped in blankets, plotting their revenge. They would decide that I needed to be punished. They would decide that I needed to be cut off from the family heritage. They would draft a letter, or call the local sheriff, or file a notice. They would take one step, one single, arrogant step, and when they did, the ground would open up beneath them. I went back to my laptop and opened the email draft I had prepared for Carmen. I attached the scanned index of the binder. Subject readiness. Carmen. The documentation is assembled. The trap is set. I am maintaining radio silence. I await their breach of contract. Elena. I hit send. I was no longer the daughter waiting for approval. I was the landlord waiting for a violation of the lease, and the eviction notice was already written. The courier envelope arrived at my desk at Arkstone Risk Solutions at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday. It was not a high-end legal packet delivered by a process server in a suit. It was a flimsy cardboard mailer dropped off by a local delivery service, the kind that smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and desperation. I stared at the return address. Miller Associates. Attorneys at law. I knew the name. Miller was a general practitioner in Pinebrook, whose office was located between a dry cleaner and a failing video rental store. He handled traffic tickets, minor zoning disputes, and the occasional angry letter for residents who wanted to scare their neighbors over property lines. He was the legal equivalent of a barking dog behind a chain-link fence loud, but ultimately confined. I picked up my letter opener. My hand was steady. I sliced the top of the envelope and pulled out the document. It was printed on heavy bond paper, an attempt to give weight to words that were essentially hollow. Ms. Elena Walsh. Notice of civil complaint and cease and desist. I began to read. The language was a clumsy mix of legal jargon and emotional venting, clearly dictated by my mother and transcribed by a lawyer who was being paid by the hour to suspend his disbelief. Dear Ms. Walsh, we represent your parents, Kenneth and Deborah Walsh, regarding your recent conduct which can only be described as malicious interference with domestic stability. Over the past 72 hours, you have engaged in a systematic campaign of utility sabotage, resulting in significant distress and potential health risks to my clients. Furthermore, your abrupt withdrawal of financial support, which had been established through years of precedent as a verbal contract of care, constitutes a breach of familial trust and creates undue hardship. I almost laughed. Familial trust. In the Walsh Dictionary, trust was synonymous with a wire transfer. But then my eyes dropped to the third paragraph. The laughter died in my throat, replaced by the cold, sharp focus of a predator recognizing a fatal error in the praise movement. Effective immediately. You are hereby formally trespassed and barred from entering the property known as Kestrel Ridge Lodge. Your license to use said property is revoked. Any personal items currently stored at the location will be boxed and returned to your residence via third-party courier. Do not attempt to access the premises, change the locks, or interfere with the quiet enjoyment of the rightful owners. Kenneth and Deborah Walsh. There it was. They had put it in writing. They had not just changed the locks. They had hired a lawyer to declare, on official letterhead, that they were the rightful owners and that I was excluded from the property. They had formalized their hostility. They had asserted exclusive dominion over an asset that I had legally rescued and technically owned. I reached for my phone to take a picture of the paragraph, but before I could unlock the screen, my desk phone rang. It was the internal extension for the Director of Human Resources. Elena, the voice was tight, uncomfortable. Can you come down to my office now? My stomach did not drop. It tightened. I knew, with a sickening intuition, that the war had just breached the perimeter of my professional life. I walked to the elevator. I smoothed my skirt. I walked into the HR office with my head high. The director, a woman named Sarah, whom I had worked with for 6 years, looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. Elena, please sit down, she said. She turned her monitor slightly away from me, but I could see the Outlook window open. We just received a very disturbing phone call. From my mother, I said. It was not a question. Sarah blinked. Yes, she identified herself as Deborah Walsh. Elena, she expressed deep concern for your mental stability. She claimed you have been acting erratically, that you are suffering from a breakdown, and that you might be a danger to yourself or others in the workplace. She suggested we check your current project files for errors due to cognitive distress. The silence in the room was absolute. This was not just a tantrum. This was a tactical nuclear strike. My mother knew that my career was my shield. She knew that my reputation as a risk analyst depended entirely on my stability, my logic, my reliability. By calling my employer and casting doubt on my sanity, she was trying to destroy the one thing I had built that she could not claim credit for. She was trying to get me fired so I would have to crawl back to her. I looked at Sarah. I did not get angry. I did not cry. I let the cold logic of my profession take over. Sarah, I said, my voice level and calm. I am currently in the middle of a financial separation from my family. I have ceased subsidizing their lifestyle, and this is their retaliation. It is a domestic dispute involving significant assets. I am not unstable. I am being extorted. I pulled out my cell phone. I opened the evidence folder. I scrolled to the screenshot of the text message Lucas had sent yesterday, the one where he threatened to make me pay. I scrolled to the log of the 47 missed calls. This is harassment, I said, sliding the phone across the desk. I apologize that it has spilled over into the office. I am handling it legally. Sarah looked at the phone. She scrolled for a moment. Her expression shifted from suspicion to horror. She saw the volume of the abuse. She saw the timestamp of the calls, 2 a.m, 3 a.m. Okay, Sarah said, handing the phone back. Her voice was softer now. Okay, Elena, I have to log the call because it is policy, but I will mark it as a malicious external communication. We will block her number from the main switchboard. Thank you, I said. It won't happen again. I walked back to my desk. The air around me felt different. I was no longer just managing a risk. I was neutralizing a threat. I scanned the letter from Miller Associates. I attached the scan to an email. I attached the log of the HR incident. To Carmen Hayes, subject trigger event. Carmen. See attached. They have formally barred me from the lodge in writing. They have also attempted to sabotage my employment via a false report to HR. They have asserted exclusive ownership. They have initiated hostility. Execute. I hit send. The response came 3 minutes later. It was a text message. Got it. They just signed the deed over to you. Drafting the affidavit now. Do not engage. I sat back in my chair. I felt a strange vibration in my pocket. It was the security app. Motion detected Kestrel Ridge Lodge. Driveway camera. I opened the app. The video feed loaded, buffering for a second before snapping into clarity. A white van was pulling into the driveway of the lodge. It had Pinebrook Lock Key stenciled on the side. Behind it was Grant's truck. Grant hopped out of the driver's side. He was wearing a heavy parka. Lucas got out of the passenger side, holding his phone up, filming. They were changing the locks. They were so confident. They thought the letter from Miller was a magic spell that made the house theirs. They thought that by physically changing the keys, they were sealing my defeat. I watched Grant gesture to the locksmith. I watched him point at the front door. I could see his breath puffing in the cold air. He looked like a lord surveying his manor. I did not get in my car. I did not drive 2 hours north to scream at them on the lawn. That is what the old Elena would have done. The old Elena would have begged them to stop. The new Elena picked up her office phone and dialed a 10-digit number. It was the non-emergency line for the county sheriff's department in the district where the lodge was located. Sheriff's Department. Dispatch. Hello? I said. I am the owner of the property at 42 Lakeview Drive. I am viewing my security feed remotely. There are individuals on my property attempting to modify the security hardware without my consent. I do not require an immediate response as there is no violence, but I would like to file a report for the record regarding unauthorized alteration of the premises. Name of the individuals, the dispatcher asked. Grant Walsh and Lucas Walsh, I said, and a contractor from Pinebrook Lock and Key. Are they family, ma'am? They are estranged relatives, I said. They do not have a lease. They do not have keys. They are attempting to force entry. We can send a deputy by to check it out. That won't be necessary right now, I said. I did not want the police to stop them. I wanted them to succeed. I wanted the bill from the locksmith to be in Grant's name. I wanted the footage of them breaking into my house to be perfectly preserved. Just log the incident, please. I will be handling the eviction civilly. Understood. Incident number is 4922. I hung up. I watched on the screen as the locksmith drilled out the core of the smart lock I had paid $400 for. I watched Grant hand the man a credit card, probably the only one he had that wasn't maxed out yet. I watched them high-five each other as the door swung open. They walked inside, into the cold, unheated house, believing they had won. They had no idea they were breaking into a house I already owned, triggering a clause that would strip them of the very right they were celebrating. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from my mother. She must have heard from Grant that they were inside. She must have felt a surge of triumph. She wanted to twist the knife. I hope you are happy. Elena, you tried to hurt us. But family always wins. You are nothing without this family. You are just a checkbook, without the Walsh name. You have no identity. You are alone. Enjoy your empty apartment. I read the words, you are nothing. For 34 years, that fear had ruled me. The fear that I was boring, that I was unlovable, that I was just a functionary in their lives. I had paid millions of emotional dollars to avoid being nothing, but as I sat there in my office, with my career secure, my bank account protected, and the deed to the lodge about to transfer into my sole name, I realized she was wrong. I was not nothing. I was the architect of their survival. And now I was the architect of their collapse. I typed a reply. My fingers moved slowly, deliberately. Then I will try living as nothing. I hit send. Then I blocked her again. A notification popped up on my email. It was Carmen. Subject filed. Elena. The affidavit of trigger has been filed electronically with the county recorder. The springing executory interest is active. The deed transfer is in the queue. By 5 o'clock today. The title will be in your name only. The life estate is extinguished. You own it all. Prepare the eviction notice. I closed the laptop. I looked out the window at the city of Madison. The snow was falling again, soft and quiet. I thought about Grant and Lucas sitting in the freezing lodge, huddled around the fireplace, thinking they were safe. I thought about my mother in Pine Brook, telling her friends she had put me in my place. They were celebrating a victory in a game that had already ended. I took a sip of my cold coffee. It tasted bitter, but it woke me up. Count your hours, I whispered. The landlord is coming. The email from the county recorder's office arrived at 9:14 in the morning on Friday. It was not marked urgent. It did not have a red flag or an exclamation point. It was a standard automated notification, the kind sent out by a government server that processes thousands of property changes a day. Subject recording confirmation. Document number 202499. 8. I clicked it open. Your document, affidavit of springing interest and transfer of deed, has been successfully recorded. The official copy is attached. I opened the PDF. It was 3 pages long. The first page was a scan of the original deed structure we had created 5 years ago. The second page was the affidavit Carmen had filed yesterday, attaching the threatening letter from Miller and Associates as Exhibit A. That letter, which my parents had paid a lawyer to write to intimidate me, was now the legal proof of their hostile action against the guarantor. By formally barring me from the property, they had violated the condition of access. I scrolled to the third page. Grantee Elena Walsh, status fee, simple absolute, life estate terminated. There were no other names. Kenneth Walsh was gone. Deborah Walsh was gone. The trust was dissolved. In the eyes of the state of Wisconsin, Kestrel Ridge Lodge belonged to me, not me and my family, not me in the future, me, right now. I did not pop a bottle of champagne. I did not cheer. I picked up my office phone and dialed a number I had researched the night before. It was a commercial security firm based in the next county over, 40 miles from Pine Brook. I did not want to use a local locksmith who might know my father or have gone to high school with Grant. I wanted strangers. I wanted professionals who saw only a work order, not a family drama. Apex Security Solutions, a man answered. This is Elena Walsh, I said. I am the owner of a property at 42 Lakeview Drive. I need a full rekey and smart lock installation. Today, immediate dispatch. We have a technician available at 1 o'clock, the dispatcher said. But that is an emergency rate. It will be $300 plus parts. Approved, I said. I also need a verification of ownership protocol. I am emailing you the recorded deed right now. If anyone else attempts to access the property or claims they live there, you are to treat it as a break-in. Is that understood? We see the deed. We do the work, the man said. We don't get involved in disputes. Perfect, I said. Grant and Lucas had left the lodge late last night. My remote sensors had picked up their departure around 11 o'clock. The cold had likely driven them out. They had changed the locks, thinking they had secured the fortress, but they had left because they couldn't survive in a fortress without heat. They were probably back at the main house in Pinebrook, warming themselves, planning their next victory lap. They did not know that the locks they had installed were now attached to a door they no longer had the right to open. At 1:30 in the afternoon, my phone pinged. It was the technician from Apex, on site, verified deed, drilled out existing hardware, installing commercial-grade deadbolts and keypad, access code sent to your secure email. I authorized the payment, then I authorized the secondary installation. I had the technician mount 2 internal cameras in the main living area and the hallway battery operated. Cellular uplink. If they broke a window to get back in, I would have their faces in high definition within seconds. At 2 o'clock, I sent the email. I addressed it to my father, my mother, Grant, and Lucas. I CC'd Carmen Hayes and Miller and Associates. Subject notice of ownership and personal property retrieval. To all parties. As of 9:14 this morning, the title to the property known as Kestrel Ridge Lodge has transferred to my sole name, pursuant to the springing executory interest clause in the original deed trust. This transfer was triggered by the formal notice of trespass sent by your legal counsel yesterday. You are no longer tenants. You have no legal right of access. I have secured the property. The locks have been changed. The access codes have been reset. Regarding personal items currently inside the lodge, I have contracted a moving company to box all personal effects not belonging to me. These items will be placed in a climate-controlled storage unit in Pinebrook. You will receive the key to this unit via certified mail within 48 hours. Do not attempt to enter the property. Law enforcement has been notified of the change in ownership. Elena Walsh. I hit send. The reaction was not immediate. There was a delay. The time it took for electrons to travel, for inboxes to refresh, for reading comprehension to kick in. At 2:15, my phone rang. It was Carmen. Grant just called my office, she said. She sounded bored. He was screaming so loud my paralegal had to hold the receiver away from her ear. He says he is going to sue you for theft. He says you stole the house. And what did you tell him? I asked. I read him the clause. Carmen said, I told him that by changing the locks yesterday and having their lawyer send that letter, they effectively signed the quitclaim deed themselves. I told him that if he wants to sue, he will have to explain to a judge why he broke into a house he had just legally forfeited. He hung up. He will try to go back there, I said. Let him, Carmen said. He keeps digging the hole deeper. By the way, Miller called me too. The lawyer they hired. He is terrified. He realized he didn't read the original deed before he sent that cease and desist letter. He committed malpractice. He triggered his client's eviction. He is going to drop them before the sun sets to save his own license. I hung up. At 2:30, the text messages started. It was Lucas first. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He went for the emotional jugular. How could you do this? That place is our childhood. You are stealing our memories. I learned to swim off that dock. Dad taught me to fish there. You are erasing us. Elena, you are cold. You are actually a monster. You are stealing my childhood. I looked at the screen. 10 years ago, that message would have broken me. I would have sobbed. I would have felt like the wicked witch destroying something pure. But I was looking at the data now. I remembered that summer when he learned to swim. I was the one watching him from the shore because Mom was taking a nap with a bottle of Chardonnay. I remembered who paid for the dock repairs 3 years ago so he could sit there and fish without falling through rotten wood. I typed a reply. Childhood is a memory. Lucas, it is not a lifetime meal ticket. You can keep the memories. I am keeping the asset I paid for. Then came the call from my mother. It came through on my work line, bypassing the block on my cell. I let it go to voicemail, but I watched the transcription appear on my screen in real time. Elena. Her voice was trembling, thick with tears. Elena, please. You have made your point. We are cold. We are scared. Why are you doing this to us? I am your mother. I carried you. Doesn't that mean anything? We can fix this. Just give us the code. We can go up there this weekend. Just us. And talk. Please. Baby. Don't take the lodge. It was a performance. It was the good mother routine, the one she pulled out when the stick failed and she needed the carrot. It was designed to make me feel powerful so I would grant mercy. But I knew the script. If I gave her the code, the moment she was inside, the tears would dry up. She would change the locks again. She would claim squatters' rights. She would call me a fool. I did not reply. 5 minutes later, a second voicemail arrived from her. The tone had shifted violently. The tears were gone. You ungrateful little bitch. You think you can outsmart me? That is my house. My father built that house. You are a thief. I will ruin you. I will tell everyone in this town what you are. You will never show your face in Pinebrook again. I saved both voicemails. I dragged them into the evidence folder. Exhibit B harassment pattern. Alternating manipulation and aggression. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel a surge of joy. I felt a heavy, quiet sense of order. The books were balancing. The ledger was correcting itself. It was not happy work, but it was necessary work. I spent the rest of the afternoon finalizing the storage unit contract. I paid for 3 months of rent at a facility in Pinebrook. It was $400. It was the last check I would ever write for them, and I considered it a severance package. I arranged for a moving crew to meet the security team at the lodge tomorrow morning. They would pack up the clothes, the fishing gear, the framed photos of everyone but me. I was cleaning the slate. At 5 o'clock, as I was packing up my laptop to leave, an email notification chimed. Sender Kenneth Walsh. I froze. My father never emailed. He barely knew how to use the interface. He typed with 2 fingers. Hunting and pecking. I opened the message. There was no subject line. Elena. I read the notice. I saw the deed. Your mother is screaming in the kitchen right now. Grant is throwing things. Lucas is crying. I am sitting in the den. It is cold in here. We have the space heaters on, but they trip the breakers if we run too many. I just wanted to say, I know. I know you paid for the roof. I know you paid for the taxes. I saw the letters years ago, and I hid them because I was ashamed. I let you fix it because I was too weak to tell your mother we were broke. I should have stood up for you at lunch. I should have stood up for you when you were 18. I have been a coward for a long time. Silence is easier than noise, but the silence cost me my daughter. You are right to take the house. It is yours. It has been yours for a long time. I just thought you would let us pretend forever. I am sorry, Dad. I stared at the screen. My vision blurred. Just for a second. This was the only crack in the armor I had built. My father, the silent enabler, admitting the truth. He admitted that their life was a pretense funded by my labor, and that his silence was a choice. He was not asking for the code. He was not asking for money. He was just admitting defeat. It was a tragedy. Really. He was a good man who had been hollowed out by a demanding wife and his own passivity. But an apology did not pay the mortgage. An apology did not retroactively fund my retirement account. An apology did not change the fact that he had watched me pack my bags 2 days ago and said nothing. I did not reply. To reply would be to open a door, and I had just paid a locksmith $300 to seal the doors shut. I saved the email. It was not evidence of a crime, but it was evidence of reality. It was the closure I hadn't realized I needed. They knew. They had always known. They just didn't care until the bill came due. I drove home. The city lights of Madison seemed brighter tonight. The air felt cleaner. I stopped at a grocery store and bought a bottle of wine. I bought a steak. I bought expensive chocolate. I went home to my apartment, cooked dinner, and ate it in silence. There was no phone ringing. The blocks were holding. The legal notices had silenced the threats of lawsuits. They were in shock. They were realizing that the ground had not just shifted, it had disappeared. At 8 o'clock, one final message slipped through. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize, likely a prepaid burner phone my mother had bought at the gas station to bypass my block. Meet me at Ruthie's Grill tomorrow at noon. We need to end this. Do not be late. I looked at the message, even now, stripped of her credit cards, stripped of her vacation home, stripped of her dignity. She was still trying to give orders. She still thought she could summon me. She thought she could sit me down in a public place, maybe cry a little, maybe threaten a scene, and bully me back into submission. She thought we were going to negotiate terms. She thought there was a compromise where she got her way and I paid for it. I took a sip of wine. I would go, not to negotiate, not to surrender. I would go because I had one last piece of paper to give her. I would go because the transition was not just legal. It needed to be visceral. She needed to see me, not as the daughter she could scold, but as the owner she had trespassed against. I did not reply to confirm. I didn't need to. I was the one holding the keys now. The printer in my home office had been running for 20 minutes, a rhythmic, mechanical hum that sounded like a heartbeat. I stood over it, watching the pages slide into the output tray one by one. Each sheet was warm to the touch. Each sheet was a brick in the wall I was building. I was not preparing for a family lunch. I was preparing for a hostile takeover defense. I had bought a black leather binder for this occasion. It was heavy, professional, the kind of binder one brings to a deposition or a tax audit. I had bought a set of color-coded dividers. I labeled them with a label maker. The font small and precise. The first tab was Utilities. Behind it, I filed the transfer confirmations, the cancellation notices for the cable and internet, and the usage graphs showing the temperature spikes in a house I didn't live in. The second tab was Transfers. This was the thickest section. It contained 5 years of bank statements, with every gift, loan, and emergency help highlighted in yellow. It was a river of money flowing in one direction. The third tab was Lodge. This section was the death blow. It held the tax redemption certificates, the repair invoices, the mechanic's liens I had satisfied, and the crowning jewel, the notification from the county recorder confirming that the deed was now solely in my name. The fourth tab was Legal. Here, I placed the threatening letter from Miller & Associates, the cease and desist that had backfired so spectacularly, and the copy of the springing transfer clause. The final tab was Harassment. This was the ugly part. It held the transcripts of the voicemails, the screenshots of the text messages, the log of the 47 missed calls, and the printout of my mother's Facebook post calling me a serpent. I closed the binder. It snapped shut with a sound of finality. I was just reaching for my coffee when my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a sharp, urgent vibration. I looked at the screen. It was not a text from my family. It was a notification from Experian, one of the credit bureaus I had frozen earlier in the week. Alert credit inquiry. Blocked. Attempted by Quick Cash Payday Lenders. LLC. Applicant name, Elena Walsh. SSN verified. Status blocked. Due to security freeze. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice water. Grant. It had to be Grant. My mother wouldn't know how to apply for an online payday loan, and Lucas was too lazy. But Grant was desperate. He had lost his insurance. He had lost his access to the lodge. He was likely facing bills he couldn't pay. And in his panic, he had tried to do what he had always done, use my credit as his personal slush fund. He had tried to take out a high-interest loan in my name, assuming that I would just pay it off later to avoid ruining my credit score. He didn't know about the freeze. He didn't know I had locked the gates. I could imagine him sitting at a computer somewhere, maybe at an internet cafe since I had cut the home connection, typing in my social security number, which he knew by heart, and hitting submit, only to be rejected. I took a screenshot of the alert. I printed it. I punched holes in it. I opened the binder to the harassment tab and clicked it into place. I sent a quick text to Carmen Hayes. Grant just tried to open a payday loan in my name. The freeze caught it. Carmen's reply came 30 seconds later. That is attempted identity theft and wire fraud. That is a felony. Elena. They are desperate. I know. I typed back. Desperation is when they unmask themselves. Carmen wrote, do not interrupt them. Let them show you exactly who they are. I checked the time. It was 10:30. I had one stop to make before the lunch. I drove to the Arkstone office. I did not go to my desk. I went straight to Sarah's office in Human Resources. Sarah looked up as I entered. She looked wary. The phone call from my mother yesterday had rattled the department. "Elena," she said, "is everything okay?" "It will be," I said. I placed a thin manila folder on her desk. "I wanted to provide you with documentation regarding the call you received yesterday. I want this on my permanent file to counter the allegations of instability." Sarah opened the folder. Inside was the letter from Miller and Associates, proving the property dispute, and the log of the abusive messages from my family. "This confirms that the call was part of a coordinated harassment campaign intended to damage my professional standing," I said, my voice steady. "It is retaliation for a domestic financial boundary I set. I have legal counsel involved, and I have secured my assets. I just wanted Arkstone to know that I'm fully capable, fully stable, and that this external noise will not affect my output." Sarah read through the documents. She paused at the text from Lucas that said, "I will ruin your life." She paused at the letter where my parents tried to ban me from my own property. She closed the folder and looked at me. Her eyes were different now. The pity was gone, replaced by a profound respect. "Thank you, Elena," she said. "I will attach this to the incident report. As far as Arkstone is concerned, the matter is closed. We will flag any future calls from these numbers as security threats. You have our full support." "Thank you," I said. I walked out of the building. I felt lighter. They had tried to take my job, and instead, they had only solidified my standing as a rational actor in a chaotic world. I got back in my car. It was 11:30. The meeting was at noon at Ruthie's Grill. Ruthie's was a Pine Brook institution. It was a diner that pretended to be a restaurant, with vinyl booths, sticky menus, and a lunch crowd that consisted of the entire town gossip network. My mother had chosen it for a reason. It was public. She thought I wouldn't dare cause a scene in front of the mayor's wife or the pastor, who were likely eating club sandwiches 3 tables away. She thought the audience would protect her. She thought the pressure of social etiquette would force me to fold, to write the check, to apologize just to make the tension go away. She was playing by the old rules. I gripped the steering wheel. I spent the 20-minute drive reciting my rules of engagement. I spoke them aloud to the windshield, my voice competing with the hum of the heater. Rule number 1: no emotional arguments. I would not debate whether I was a good daughter or a bad sister. Those were subjective labels. I would stick to the numbers. The numbers did not have feelings. Rule number 2: no bargaining. This was not a negotiation. I was not there to find a middle ground. The middle ground was where I paid for half of their mistakes. I was done with the middle ground. Rule number 3: no owning their shame. If they made a scene, if they cried, if they screamed, I would not absorb it. Their emotions were their property, not mine. I pulled into the parking lot of Ruthie's Grill at 11:55, 5 minutes early. I saw my father's car parked near the entrance. It was a 5-year-old sedan that needed a wash. Next to it was Grant's truck, the one I had just removed from my insurance policy. I took a deep breath. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, but sharp. I looked like a woman who was done with games. I grabbed the black binder from the passenger seat. It felt heavy, like a shield. I walked into the restaurant. The smell hit me instantly: bacon grease, stale coffee, and lemon polish. The noise level was high. The clatter of silverware and the murmur of dozens of conversations. I scanned the room. They were sitting in a large booth in the back corner. They had arrived before me, likely to stage the scene, to establish their territory. I stopped and watched them for a moment. They didn't see me yet. My mother was wearing her Sunday best, a cream-colored blouse, a heavy pearl necklace, and a blazer that looked too formal for a Friday lunch at a diner. She had her hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection. She was sitting upright, her face composed in a mask of tragic dignity. She looked like a deposed queen waiting for her subjects to beg for forgiveness. Grant was sitting next to her. He looked terrible. His face was pale, shiny with sweat. He was bouncing his leg under the table, a nervous tic I hadn't seen since high school. He kept glancing at the door, then at his phone. He knew about the loan rejection. He knew I knew. Lucas was slouched in the corner, arms crossed over his chest. He looked like a petulant teenager. Though he was 29, he was scowling at the menu as if the prices were a personal insult. And my father, Kenneth, he sat on the outside of the booth. He looked smaller than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped forward. He was staring into a glass of water, his hand shaking slightly. He looked like a man who was waiting for the executioner and was relieved that the waiting was almost over. It looked like a tribunal, a family court, where the verdict had already been decided in their favor, and they were just waiting for the defendant to show up for sentencing. I walked toward them. My heels clicked against the linoleum floor. The sound was sharp, rhythmic. Grant saw me first. He nudged my mother. She turned. Her eyes locked onto mine. For a second, I saw the flash of anger, the heat of the humiliation she had suffered at the grocery store. But then, instantly, the mask slid back into place. She adjusted her expression to one of disappointed love. She pursed her lips. I reached the table. The conversation in the nearby booths quieted down. People were watching. They knew who we were. They knew something was happening. I did not say hello. I did not kiss my mother on the cheek. I did not nod to my brothers. I stood at the end of the table. "Elena," my mother said. Her voice was loud enough to be heard by the next table. "I am glad you finally decided to show up. We have been worried sick. Sit down. We ordered you an iced tea." She was trying to frame the narrative immediately. "We are the worried family. You are the wayward child." I looked at the iced tea. I didn't touch it. I sat down in the empty chair at the head of the table. I was not part of their booth. I was separate. I placed the black binder on the table. Thud. It was a heavy, solid sound. It sounded like a gavel hitting a block. The silverware on the table jumped slightly. Grant looked at the binder. He swallowed hard. Lucas sneered. "What is that? Are you doing our taxes now?" My mother let out a short, dismissive laugh. It was a brittle sound. "Oh, Elena, always with the drama. What is in the book? Did you write us a letter? Are you going to read us a poem about how hard your life is?" She leaned forward, her pearls clicking against the table edge. She lowered her voice, but the venom was clear. "Put the papers away. We are not here to play office. We are here to discuss how you are going to fix the mess you made. You embarrassed me, Elena. You embarrassed this family. Now, take out your checkbook, and let's settle the arrears on the accounts you recklessly closed." She smiled. It was a smile that had controlled me for 3 decades, a smile that said, "I own you." "Those papers don't scare anyone," she said, flicking her hand toward the binder. "It is just paper." I looked at her. I looked at Grant, who was avoiding my eyes. I looked at my father, who was watching me with a sad resignation. "You are right, Mom," I said. My voice was calm, projecting just enough to be heard clearly by everyone at the table. "It is just paper." I reached for the cover of the binder. "But you might want to read it," I said. "Before you order lunch." I flipped the cover open. The first page was not a check. It was the screenshot of Grant's failed loan application, stamped with the word fraud in red letters. I watched Grant's face turn the color of ash. "Shall we begin?" I asked. The silence that followed my question was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum, the kind that exists right before a structure implodes. Grant was staring at the first page of the binder, at the screenshot of the credit inquiry that had been blocked by the freeze I had placed only days ago. The red stamp that read fraud seemed to pulse under the diner lights. "What is this?" Grant whispered. His voice was a dry rattle. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and guilt. "Elena, I was just checking something. I wasn't actually going to go through with it." "It is a federal crime." "Grant," I said, my voice conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "Wire fraud, identity theft, attempting to access credit using a social security number that does not belong to you. I have the IP address. I have the timestamp. Carmen Hayes has the file." "Carmen." My mother's head snapped up. The name of the high-powered attorney cut through her facade of boredom. Why are you talking to that woman? She is expensive. You can't afford her. I can afford her, I said, because I am no longer supporting 3 other adults. My mother's face hardened. She waved her hand dismissively at the binder. Oh, stop it. So Grant made a mistake. He is desperate because you cut him off like a sociopath. You drove him to it. It is your fault. Now put that book away. We are not here to talk about loans. We are here to talk about the lodge. She sat up straighter, adjusting her pearls. She had decided to play her trump card. She had decided to hurt me. We received the notification that you called the police on your brothers yesterday, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Calling the sheriff on your own family. It is sick, Elena, but it ends today. Miller sent you the letter. You are banned. If you set foot on the Kestrel Ridge property again, I will have you arrested for trespassing. I will put you in handcuffs myself if I have to. Grant nodded, finding a shred of courage in his mother's aggression. That is right. You are out. We are the legal owners of the life estate. You are just the guarantor. You have no rights to access if we say no. Miller explained it all. Miller, I repeated. I let the name hang in the air. Did Miller explain the springing executory interest clause? Grant blinked. The what? Turn the page, I said to Grant. He didn't move. He was paralyzed. I reached over and flipped the tab marked Lodge. There it was. The document I had received from the county recorder at 9:14 that morning. The official seal of the county was visible at the top, along with the recording timestamp. I slid the binder toward the center of the table so everyone could see. You are right, Mom, I said. You sent me a letter banning me from the property. You formally asserted exclusive ownership and denied my access. You put it in writing. So what? She snapped. It is my house. No, I said. It was your house as long as you allowed me access. That was the deal. That was the contract you signed 5 years ago to save it from foreclosure. The deed was held in a trust, but the contract had a trigger. If you ever attempted to legally bar me from the premises, the life estate would terminate immediately. I pointed to the line on the document where the transfer was recorded. You pulled the trigger yesterday, I said. You just handed me the keys. My mother stared at the paper. She squinted, trying to make sense of the legal language. What does fee simple absolute mean? It means I own it, I said. All of it, 100%. There is no trust anymore. There is no life estate. You are not owners. You are not tenants. You are strangers. You are lying, my mother whispered. Her face drained of color, leaving her rouge standing out like bruises on her cheeks. You are lying. Miller would have told us. Miller didn't read the deed, I said. And now Miller is probably calling his malpractice insurance carrier, but that doesn't change the fact that as of this morning, Kestrel Ridge Lodge belongs to me. Solely, you can't do that. Lucas shot up from his seat. His chair screeched against the floor. People turned to look. You thief. That is our house. You stole it. You tricked them with fine print. I will tell everyone. I will tell the police. You stole our inheritance. Sit down, Lucas, I said. No, you are a criminal. He shouted, his face red. I reached for my phone. I opened the security app. I tapped the video file from yesterday afternoon. I turned the screen toward them and pressed play. The video was clear. It showed Grant and Lucas standing on the porch. It showed the locksmith drilling the lock. It showed them high-fiving as they broke into a house that, at that exact moment, legally belonged to me. This is footage from yesterday, I said. This is you breaking and entering. This is you destroying security hardware on a property you do not own. This is a felony. Lucas, do you want me to play this for the sheriff, or do you want to sit down and lower your voice? Lucas looked at the video. He looked at the people staring at him from the other tables. He sank back into his chair, deflated, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. My father, who had been staring at the table this whole time, finally looked up. His eyes were wet. He looked at the deed. He looked at me. Elena, he said softly. His voice was trembling. You really did it. You really took it from the family. It was the question that was supposed to break me. It was the guilt trip designed to pierce the heart of the dutiful daughter. I looked him in the eye. I felt no guilt. I felt only clarity. I didn't take it from the family, Dad, I said. I took it from the people who tried to kick me out of it. You tried to erase me from the deed. I just corrected the error. My mother let out a sob. It was a ragged, desperate sound. She reached across the table, her hand trembling, trying to grab my wrist. I pulled my hand back. Elena, baby, please, she said. Her eyes were wide, pleading. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a terrifying, raw panic. I didn't mean it. The letter? I was just mad. You know how I get. I am hot-headed. I say things I don't mean. I didn't want to ban you. I just wanted you to apologize. We can undo this. We can call the lawyers. Don't take the lodge. It is all I have. It is who we are. You signed the letter. Mom, I said. You hired a lawyer. You put your signature on a document that said I was not welcome. That is not being hot-headed. That is intent. You signed it when you were sober. You signed it when you were lucid. I was hurt, she cried. I was hurt because you embarrassed me at the store. And because you were hurt, you tried to destroy me, I said. You tried to get me fired. You tried to steal my house. Now you are dealing with the consequences. Grant wiped sweat from his forehead. He looked at the binder, then at me. Okay. Look, we can work this out. What if we rent it, huh? We can pay you rent. We can do a payment plan. Just don't lock us out completely. Let us use it for the weekends. We will pay you back. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Rent? I asked. Grant, you just tried to commit identity fraud to get a payday loan because you have $0 in your account. You cannot afford your own car insurance. I canceled it 3 days ago, and you haven't reinstated it because you can't pay the premium. How exactly are you going to pay rent on a waterfront property? Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The truth was a wall he could not climb. For a long moment, no one spoke. The noise of the diner seemed to fade away, leaving us in a bubble of absolute devastation. They looked at the binder. They looked at the video on my phone. They looked at the reality of their lives stripped of my subsidies. They were small. They were powerless. They were exactly who they were without me. Then, the waitress appeared. She didn't know the world had just ended at table 4. She smiled cheerfully. Here is the check, folks, she said. She placed the small black tray in the center of the table. It was a reflex, a muscle memory honed over 20 years. My mother looked at the check, then looked at me. My father looked at the check, then looked at me. Grant and Lucas looked at the check, then looked at me. They waited. They waited for me to sigh. They waited for me to reach for my purse. They waited for me to pick up the tab because it was easier than fighting. Because family helps family. Because I was the wallet. The silence stretched. It was heavy. It was expectant. I looked at the check. The total was visible. $84. I reached into my purse. I pulled out a single $20 bill. I placed it on the table next to the tray. I had an iced tea, I said, and I'm covering a generous tip for the space I took up. That is my share. My mother stared at the bill. Elena. I stood up. I picked up my black binder. I picked up my phone. You told me to stop relying on the family, I said. My voice was clear, carrying to the nearby booths. You told me to stand on my own. I did. I am standing. I looked down at them one last time. Now, I said, it is your turn. I turned around. Elena, my mother screamed. You come back here. You pay this bill, Elena. I walked past the table of the mayor's wife. I walked past the pastor. I walked past the waitress who looked confused. I walked out the door and into the parking lot. The cold air hit my face, and it felt like a baptism. I got into my car. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I did not check my phone. I drove. I drove out of the parking lot, onto the main road, and headed north. 2 hours later, The tires of my car crunched over the fresh snow of the driveway at 42 Lakeview Drive. It was dark now. The woods were silent. The air was crisp and smelled of pine and ice. I walked up the steps to the heavy wooden door of Kestrel Ridge Lodge. I did not fumble for a key I didn't have. I did not wait for someone to let me in. I punched a 6-digit code into the new keypad. Beep, click, whir, the deadbolt retracted. The sound was mechanical and sweet. I pushed the door open. The house was cold, but the electricity was on. I walked in and turned on the lights. I walked to the thermostat and turned it up to 70 degrees. I walked to the great stone fireplace. I stacked the wood. I lit the match. Within minutes, the fire was roaring, casting dancing orange light against the high beams of the ceiling. I poured myself a glass of water. I walked to the large window that overlooked the frozen lake. It was pitch black out there, save for the reflection of the moon on the ice. It was quiet. I sat down in the leather armchair facing the fire. I took a deep breath. There was no phone buzzing. There was no one asking for a loan. There was no one telling me I was too sensitive, or too controlling, or not enough. I was alone, and for the first time in my life, alone did not feel like a punishment. It felt like a victory. I watched the flames curl around the wood. My life was no longer an invoice for someone else's happiness. It was mine. The heat was mine. The silence was mine. The future was mine. I took a sip of water and smiled. "Done," I whispered. "Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your office, your car, or maybe the comfort of your own home? Please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and connect with others. If you enjoyed Elena's journey, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.